Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 327 of Goulet Q&A. I am Brian Goulet here at Goulet HQ, and this is a place where fountain pens are still a thing. Can't get rid of us. Let's see here. Today, I'm going to be talking about how much the average fountain pen feed holds in the ink, because I talked about doing all the measurements and stuff last week. I think it prompted a couple extra questions, which is cool. I'm going to be troubleshooting a burpy traveler's pen, which if you're not in the pen world is going to make no sense to you whatsoever. What do you do if you want to get ink samples, but you live in the UK? I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Spoiler alert, it has nothing to do with tariffs, actually. Well, sort of. Not the recent tariffs. Anyway, don't want to spoil it all because that's coming later. Wait for that fun. Which pens work best on carbon copy paper? And I'm going to spotlight the Pilot Vanishing Point 2025. Link midnight. It'll be a good time had by all today. Let's get into some feedback. All right, first bit of feedback. This comes from Marvin Mediocre. Have you thought about adding a column in your spreadsheet for the location of the pen? This is talking about my spreadsheet that I keep of all the pens in my collection. Of course, that would require labeling your pen trays. So I do actually have that. That was one of the things that I edited out for the version that I showed you all because it was really not relevant to you whatsoever. So I have like 6 of these IKEA cabinets that have 6 drawers each. So that is 36 drawers, which is plenty. And it gets kind of confusing as to which one is in which. So I do keep it labeled in the spreadsheet, but honestly, that doesn't matter quite as much as it does, basically physically where I keep them. So I keep labels of all the brands. I have it all broken down by brand. And if there's more pens in one brand than will fit in a single drawer, then I will list out which models go in which drawers. So I do not put where they are positioned in the tray. Like I don't have individual slots with numbers or anything like that. To manage that would just be so meticulous and arduous. I don't do that. But I do have them labeled by which drawer they're in. So you just didn't see that. But great idea. Great suggestion because I'm already doing it. Okay, Lisa's Mullen says, can you add chapters to the video? Oh, okay. I think I actually talked about this last week and I was like, I thought I had chapters. Maybe I'll look into that. Yeah, totally do. It was like this weird glitch that happened for just a couple hours on YouTube where it wasn't showing the timestamp chapters. Just happened to get asked that question in the middle of that. And they should work just fine. So we've been doing chapters for forever. We don't do automatic chapters because we always put in timestamps for our videos. There may be some automatic chapters back in the day before we did timestamps, but you're talking a long time ago at this point. I think we've been doing timestamps for over a decade. So there you go. It's just a weird glitch. And then David Tier 80 says, according to Wearingle's website, under the description for the Star Child, they note that yellow inks tend to have flow issues, and this ink addresses that issue. So it was a question about whether yellow inks are drier. So I don't know. That seems maybe to point to the fact that yellow inks could be a little bit more maintenance or a little drier. I'm not sure. I talked about that last week. And then to follow this up, this one is fun. I literally laughed out loud in real life when I read this one. So Jay Cortez 3300 says, I just wanted to thank you for making your videos ad-free. Granted, in a lot of ways, they're just an hour and a half long ads. 100%. Yes, they are. It's not usual for me to pause your videos. It's not unusual for me to pause your videos and go over to Goulet Pens to put something in my cart. But it's still nice to be able to set my laptop someplace, sit back and knit or write or do a puzzle without getting interrupted every few minutes by someone mixing house paint with scrambled eggs and loudly talking about toenail fungus. That's really weird. Is that what your ads are? That's very strange. I'm sure it's just like they're just trying to get somebody's attention. But I don't run ads, so I don't actually know. And I admittedly, I splurge. I am a YouTube premium subscriber personally. So ads are just not a part of my life. I get unreasonably irritated whenever ads are in my existence because I'm just at the phase of life where I have more I don't know, I have more things I want to do than I have time to do them. So I just don't want to watch ads. Anyway, Jay Cortez goes on to say, I think it's a huge part of why I will watch enormous Goulet videos and playlists from start to finish. Like purchasing from your company, it's a very pleasant, low-stress experience. Well, that is awesome. Thank you. And I know you're not the only one that feels that way. And that is validating because, believe me, the temptation is there to just go ahead and turn on ads, get some extra money in our pockets. But it's a worse experience for you all. So I don't want to do that. Now, I will say, a couple of years ago, YouTube did change it to where they can basically put ads on things if they want to, whether or not we monetize. But I don't think they're doing that a lot because I don't think the fountain pen space is extremely lucrative. So it'd probably be different if we were dealing with, like, I don't know, pet products or kid products or something like that, electronics or doing finance stuff, whatever. But I think the CPMs in the fountain pen space are pretty low. So that's why it's okay for us to just not, do it. Anyway, great feedback. Glad to have that. I got a couple new products and then we'll get into the questions. All right, first off, we have some new blotter paper. Yes, I know you're excited about that. This comes from Esterbrook. We have not had new blotter paper in a very long time. We've had the Urban blotter paper, I think, literally from the beginning. I think it was in our first order that we ever placed of fountain pen products, and we carried it ever since. But this is different blotter paper. It's a different color, and it comes from Esterbrook and not Jacques Urban. It is $13.95. It is 5 sheets that are like A5 sized. They have a couple of sheets that are full-size sheets. They have a couple that are perforated that you can, like, they turn into like third sheets. So if you do use a blotter, it's kind of a standard size for a blotter. Or if you just wanted to use it as like a little bookmark or something like that, you could. So yeah, we have 2 designs. I think Esterbrook has more of them, but we're carrying those 2 for now because we're going to test it out, see if y'all like it. If you want us to expand, we can look at expanding. I don't know. So we have Nature and Coffee Monster Co. So Coffee Monster Co. is like a limited edition kind of a thing. So if you like that vibe, you can go check that out. And then the Nature one, it's got turtles, it's got birds, it's got all kinds of fun stuff. I believe that the Nature ones allude a little bit to some of the themes of their pens, which is kind of fun. So yeah, that's neat. And then, if you don't know what blotter paper is, it's just really absorbent paper that, if you write, something with like a really wet ink and it's not dry yet, put the blotter paper on it and it's supposed to keep it from smearing. It soaks up all the excess ink. So what I do when I use it is I like to take it and use it basically as a bookmark inside my notebooks, especially because the notebooks I use, mostly Goulet notebooks that have Tomoe River paper, which is not absorbent, which is a good thing, but not sometimes when you're writing and you just want to close your notebook and go. The blotter paper can be really helpful for that. So yeah, I also use a wire-bound Clairefontaine notebook for notes in other areas of my personal life. And now that I think about it, because you're like flipping it around, I do end up smearing that sometimes. And I have not thought to put a blotter paper in there, and I'm going to do that now. Anyway, so we have that. Go check it out. We also have a new pen from Monteverde. Well, it's a new color. So it's their Dakota pen, which is pretty cool. It's got a very smooth action cap, which is very gratifying. And it has a rollerball version as well as a fountain pen version. So you can get either one, whichever one you like. This fountain pen version is $60. Rollerball version is $52. So this is a new color called Air Force Blue. So the whole Dakota thing has got a military World War II kind of vibe to it. And Air Force Blue is the new color that they have. So they use a standard Yovo number 5 steel nib. Well, I guess it's not standard. This is made especially for Monteverde, but it is made by Yovo and it's number 5 size. You can switch it up. Well, the housing is different. So it's weird. Yovo makes the nibs, but the housings are different because Monteverde had to kind of retrofit their housings on their other pen because they used to have the nibs made by somebody else. Anyway, long story short, it has a Yovo made nib. They have extra fine and medium sizes. The rollerball has an extra fine, and I think a medium. I can't remember. But yeah, so pretty neat. Let's see here. What else do we have? Esterbrook. And going back to Esterbrook here, we have some pen cases. So I talked about the Monteverde ones previously, which are pretty new. Well, Esterbrook Nooks. So they've had a couple of different versions of the Nooks now. And these ones are slightly different colors, slightly different arrangements. And it's kind of nice because they keep improving them every time. So they look really nice. Build quality seems to be really good. So Esterbrook is definitely hitting their groove, finding these Nooks in the way that we want to have them. So we have a 12 case, a 6 case, a 3, a 2, and a single pen sleeve. So yeah, they range in price from, the sleeve is going to be the cheapest, but the 2-pen case, which is actually the hard case, is going to be $85. The 12-pen case is $140. So they're not like top of the line because they're synthetic leather and they're not real leather. And then they are not the bargain either. So they're kind of in the middle there somewhere. And I think that's fitting because they definitely have a better quality than some of like the cheapest stuff out there. But they're not, super premium stuff like you would get. It's like Italian leather kind of things because some of those can get crazy expensive. But we don't carry most of that stuff because y'all don't really want it, at least from us. So we don't carry a ton of it, the really expensive stuff, I mean. And then they have a moss green and blue dandelion color. So those are pretty cool. Check them out. We've got some good photography on those. Thank you, Glenn. We have a couple ink things. We have Wearing Gold, new color Narcissus, and Gold Mund ink. $27 for that. It's a glistening black with gold shimmer. That's made in South Korea. And then, this isn't really new, but it's just new packaging, I guess, a new assortment. So the Sailor Shikiori ink previously came in a cartridge, 3-pack of cartridges, which is not a ton. And I think it was like $6 or something like that. And now you get you get 8 cartridges. And I think it's like $8 or something like that. I should probably know that. Let me verify that. Since, I'm on video talking to thousands of people. $8. Yep. $8 for an 8-pack. So definitely a better value. You get more cartridges. So it's kind of a win all around if you're into that. Now, they are proprietary cartridges, so they only fit Sailor pens. And of course, you can always buy the bottle of ink that these cartridges match to because they are all available in bottles. And that'll still be a more affordable way to do it. But you have this option now. So that's kind of neat. Thank you, Sailor, for updating the value of your cartridges. All right, a couple quick company updates and then question time. So we got a new video out this week, top professional pens, which you're like, Brian, you are wearing a Donkey Kong shirt. We don't think you're very professional. And I would be like, well, technically I am professional because I get paid to do a job. So I'm professional. What is professional anyway? I guess I don't have any kind of certification or special degree to do my job. I guess that's what I might consider a professional. If you're like a CPA, lawyer, engineer, something like that. In that case, I am very unprofessional. But I still made a list of professional pens for the people that are actually certified to do a job. Not just, making videos and selling pens on the internet. Anyway, so that should be a fun video. You can go check that one out. And then I do want to let you all know, you're going to miss me next week because I'm not doing a Q&A. I have a schedule conflict and we'll have to skip it, but I will be back after that. So anyway, I'll miss you all, but I'll come back and then, I'll just try to make today such a good episode that you'll be like absolutely satisfied for a couple of weeks. Okay, let's get into questions, shall we? Here we go. Question number 1. This one comes from an email that I got from Kevin. Thank you, Kevin, for your email. Kevin says, here's a question that I have not seen anywhere. How much ink does the average feed hold? We know about converters, about eyedropper pens, vac fillers, piston fillers, among others. The feed must have been measured by somebody. Well, you are correct. So if you saw episode 326 from last week, I did talk about how we do a lot of different measurements. And I talked about how I didn't show full on necessarily how we measure out the ink capacity, but I did talk about it. So basically, ink, which is essentially water, same density as water because it's mostly water. It's basically 1 gram of how much water weighs is the same as 1 milliliter of ink. So you just measure, fractions of grams, and that gets you the fractions of milliliters. So what we do when we are measuring out all the different pens and the pen models, in order to get like a full filling, the only reliably accurate way to get a full filling measurement is to fill it as much as humanly possible. Because some pens, it depends if you're just filling the pen regularly. There's going to be some air up there in the top of the converter or in top of the piston or whatever. You're not, without doing some kind of extra hack, you're not necessarily getting 100% full pen when you fill a fountain pen. Spoiler alert. But when we do our measurements, we get it 100%, because then it's like, it does not matter how the pen fills or what method is used. It's just 100% full. That's the maximum capability of the pen to hold ink. So that's how we measure it out. So in order to do that, to maintain our sanity, we're not doing that for literally every pen that we get in. We do it for each model. So what, we have some that are, standard, like, Edison pens for different models. They're using a standard Yovo housing. They're using a cartridge. They're using a converter. You can eyedropper convert it. Rather than having to measure out the full thing on every single one, we will measure the grip. So we'll fill the pen, take off the converter. That grip is then full. We'll weigh that, and the difference between an empty one and that one that's filled with water or ink, that is the capacity of the feed. So we don't publish the capacities of feeds, because why would that be relevant to you at all? It wouldn't. It would just be kind of extra confusion. Really what matters is how much the ink capacity is with the different mechanisms that you're filling it with. So if we have a pen, I'm just going with Edison as an example. We have a pen. We will say what the short cartridge capacity is, what the long cartridge capacity is, and what the eyedropper capacity is. Because and the converter, I guess. Yeah. So you have 4 different ways that one could be filled. So we have, when we do our measurements, we are measuring that housing, the grip, and then we're measuring the cartridge, short and long, the converter, and then the eyedropper portion of the body. So, we are then adding all of those measurements to the individual grip or housing or feed measurement, whatever you want to call it. Usually the feed is filling out the whole housing or whatever. So that's really kind of what you're measuring, is the feed, but the feed is within the housing. So we'll just use those terms interchangeably. It's the housing, it's the feed, it's whatever, the whole nib unit, if you will. So, basically you're asking what the average one is. So that was easy because we keep it all in a spreadsheet. And so I just literally dragged and clicked and got the average for the whole thing. So the average for all the cartridge converter pens that we've ever measured is 0.24 milliliters. So about a quarter of a milliliter in the feed, in the housing. It does range a little bit. The one that I saw that was least was actually the Diplomat Magnum, and that is 0.21 milliliters. Another one is, I thought, like the Pilot Vanishing Point. That thing's pretty skinny. That's 0.15, so it's below average. A standard number 5 Yovo would be 0.2 milliliters, and the standard number 6 Yovo is 0.3 milliliters, so a little bit more. But again, even between like a 0.2 and a 0.3 milliliters, you're talking about a tenth of a milliliter. It's not very much. Not very much difference in there, even between like a Diplomat Magnum and, one of the bigger ones. I forget what the biggest one was. I think the biggest one was kind of an outlier. It was like the Visconti Pininfarina, which was this special edition thing that had just a massive internal mechanism kind of a thing. It was like a Vanishing Point nib unit, except it was like huge. It was like 1.13 milliliters or something like that. I just took that one out of the equation because that was a one-off weird pen that has not been available in a very long time. So anyway, but basically that's kind of what you're looking at. So, I guess it's relevant if you are installing a cartridge, or, if you're filling a converter directly from the bottle and then putting it on a new dry pen, you are missing out on somewhere between 0.12 and 0.3 milliliters of ink capacity in there. So, I recommend, if you're going to be doing that technique, you can't really do much with the cartridge, I guess. I think you just, you know, it's advantageous to you just to use repeated cartridges, and you know, just your first one you'll use up a little faster. But if you're filling with a converter directly from a bottle, you should fill that and then install it on the back of your nib unit, and then push a little ink down until it sort of saturates the feed a little bit, and then pull it out and then fill up the converter again, because you'll have let out about half the converter by the time you've put it all into the feed, especially on like a number 6, you know, standard size. Yeah, you will definitely be filling about half of it. So that's what I got. Great question. Next one, this is from Alexander Wolf. Says, "Hi Brian, I bought the Traveler's fountain pen and I love it. I used the ink cartridge that came with it. I left it for about a week, and when I used it again, a drop of ink fell out of the nib. I thought that was weird. That is weird for that pen. I kept writing and another drop fell out. I opened it and found the cartridge was loose. I treated well and it hadn't fallen out. I tried to reinsert it, but couldn't, even with all the force that I could muster. I replaced the cartridge and the same thing happened. I was able to pierce it, but it wouldn't fit properly. Do you have any idea what could have happened?" I have a couple ideas. This is a pen that I know well because I carry it around with me all the time. So I have a couple of thoughts, and then I have a potential solution for you. So first one, and this is going to sound very basic, so forgive me, I'm not trying to insult your intelligence or anything, but make sure you have standard international cartridges, because that's what this pen takes. If you have some other type of cartridge, maybe that looks similar to it, the opening could be a slightly different size, and then it would not fit on properly. So I've never had an issue with standard international cartridges. In fact, this is a Kaweco cartridge that I just emptied and refilled with. I think I have Diamine Oxblood in here. Make sure you have the right cartridges. That's number one. Number two is check your feed post. And I specifically wanted to kind of zoom in here and show you what's going on with my feed posts so that you can see with yours. So your feed post should be about the height of the inner black nib lining there, the nib unit lining, whatever you want to call that. The feed itself is inside that feed post. But that post, is a little circle that goes around the feed, the back of the feed. So my guess is there maybe is some kind of damage to that. That could have happened. I don't really know how, but it could happen if you were, just with normal use. I really don't know how it would happen because they can be fragile, I guess, but with just normal installing a cartridge, you're usually pushing it straight on and it's not an issue. But I guess if it was at an angle and you pushed it and it bent it, or if it, I guess if it had bent a little bit and maybe it had a hairline crack or something, I don't really know. But I would check your feed post and see if that feed post is damaged in any way or missing, because I suppose that could happen. But if you have a standard international cartridge and you have your feed post in place, it should fit on there. I don't really know what to tell you, but there's some kind of interaction here between the mating of those two, because the cartridges should be sealed. So when you puncture it, that should be the only hole that's in the cartridge. And if it's on the back of the feed there, that's the only place for the ink to go. So there's got to be an air leakage somewhere. That's why it's dripping out of your pen. So my guess is that there's some kind of damage somewhere in this whole thing. And I thought, let me try removing this nib unit, because I don't remember. It's been a while since I've actually taken this apart. I believe when I unscrew it in here, I believe part of the black housing stays in there. Oh, well, actually the whole thing comes out. So that's even easier actually. So there's the brass part here, which is the grip, and that is what the housing threads into. So you should be able to see the housing itself. There you can see that feed post a little bit better now, but there's your feed post. And then if I remove the feed, I probably could have done this with a pen I didn't already have inked up, but you know what? That's okay. It's just going to look like I had an injury. But y'all can witness, I don't have an injury. Let's see here. I'm going to try to. There we go. Pulling that out of there. Okay, so there's your feed. So the back of the feed is a bit fragile, especially this one. Every pen's designed a little bit differently, but this one is sort of like a half feed post, which is kind of interesting. And then, yeah, if you look back on here, so that circular part, boy, it's like really having a hard time focusing. There we go. So that circular part there, that's the actual feed post that the cartridge will fit on. And so that part is there for the cartridge to fit around it so that it protects this more fragile part on the back of the feed. So that's what's happening there. So I would check that to see if there's some kind of damage. Now, if that's not the issue, I am genuinely kind of stumped. But I have a hack for you that I think might work. I'm going to install this. Boy, I really look like I got in a fight or something like that. I don't think there's a specific way, like I don't think there's a keyed opening here. I think I can just pretty much stick this in anyway. Yeah, it's just friction fit in there. Okay, so there's a little bit of play in the back here. Zoom out a tad so you can see more what's going on. Okay, so if I reinstall my grip here, ta-da, reinstall that. I guess that could be another thing. Maybe make sure that this is installed, like it's screwed in all the way, screwed in tight. That shouldn't make that much of a difference, honestly, because really the cartridge is just fitting onto here. But I don't know. Maybe that could be an issue. Make sure your housing is screwed all the way into your grip. But if you put this on here, install your cartridge, and then I hold up the back of the pen to it, you can see that there's a little bit of a gap when this thing is sitting inside there, but before it gets to the actual back of the pen. So that could potentially be a hack. If there's something broken up there, it may still leak for you, but this would at least keep the cartridge up against the back of your feed. So you could either like tear off some paper towel or something and kind of shove it down in there, you know, just to fill that little end. And then that would provide some pressure on the back of the cartridge, especially once it's screwed in and installed. Or you could grab a spring, which I just happen to have a Pilot G2, which is very popular style of pen. You probably have one laying around. Rather than toss the whole pen when you're done with it, get the spring out of there. And it just so happens this spring actually works pretty great. So you just drop that in the back and, you know, it's going to be springy, obviously. But you go to screw it on. It's a little bit extra work to screw it on in the first place. But then you put it on there, it closes up nicely, and now that cartridge is like pressed on there. And I don't have to worry about that coming off at all. So maybe that could be a little hack if there is some kind of damage and you don't really know what to do about it. Try that and see if that helps. You know, it could maybe work on some other types of pens that you have too. But yeah, little springs like that can be really helpful in this type of circumstance. So there you go. Sorry you had that issue, but maybe you have a solution now. All right, question number 3, Juicy Louisi. Juicy Louisi? These avatar names, I'm sorry. Okay, Juicy Louisi says, use samples. I would love to, but I can't get them in the UK. Could you look into doing something for the UK as an exception to your $200, please? Maybe a limited run of a sample collection. So yeah, I don't know if there are any UK retailers that do ink samples. Maybe you could ask, you know, some of them if they can, or if that's anything they're interested in. It is challenging, I will say. So the whole $200 thing. So it's we say $200. That's our kind of thing, but let me explain where this all comes from and why we have a limitation. It actually has nothing to do with ink samples at all. Purely has to do with money threshold. So back in 2021, there were some changes to the VAT tax, treatment of overseas goods being sold to customers in the UK. So sellers who dispatch goods valued at £135 or less to UK customers as well as online marketplaces that facilitate these sales. They must register with the HMRC and charge UK VAT at the point of sale. So what that means is that y'all still have to pay the VAT, because that was the ruling that was different. Was there were some exceptions to the VAT under a certain threshold, and they took those away. So you basically have to pay VAT on everything. But they put the burden on the overseas sellers. So anything under $200, we have to collect it and we have to file it with the HMRC, which is literally a completely foreign process for us. And it's not uninvolved. Basically, we can't even just file it and, send a Venmo or something like that. No, we have to have a registered agent in the UK to file the paperwork, a physical human in the UK, which, could be like you hire somebody who does that for companies, but we have to have an actual person that we have a relationship with, and then they register and file all of our stuff. So we have to collect the VAT from you for anything under $200, or we say $200, but it's in British pounds. So it's 135 pounds. That changes and floats, depending. But then we have to file all that extra paperwork and do all that stuff. It is burdensome, very burdensome, especially for a smaller seller like us. We may seem big, but we're not big in terms of global international imports and exports. We are peons compared to other larger companies that do that kind of thing. So that's one reason we don't do that. Also, in order to do that, you have to collect and deal everything in British pounds. So we would actually have to set up something custom on our site to be able to collect British pounds instead of dollars, which is an additional complication, an additional burden for us. And let's see here. There was another thing that was a reason, and I wrote it down. To actually do the collecting and remittance, there was an additional complication that, we use software to collect some of this kind of stuff, because there are several different countries that have some weird things like this. But, we have to deal a lot with United States sales tax with different states. I think we currently have to file in 45 different states, which is awesome. And we don't see any of that money, by the way. We actually have to pay quite a bit to be able to do all the filings and things like that. So we're not having a great time with the sales tax thing either. I know y'all don't love it, but we certainly don't either. Anyway, there's an issue with the UK thing because I believe there's a limitation with the company that we use to help us integrate all these different sales tax things. We can't split out a British pound threshold. So what would end up happening is it's either all or nothing. So we would end up having to charge the VAT for everything, even stuff over $200, and then we would have to issue a refund or something, because the 135 pounds. But if it was over 135 pounds, you're going to get charged that VAT at customs, and then we don't have a way to not collect it easily. So we would have to adjust every single order manually, or we would have to, collect it all and then issue refunds and stuff like that. Basically, it's a huge pain to do all this stuff. So as much as it stinks, we just decided we were not going to be able to ship to the UK for any orders under $200, which kind of stinks. And we made it $200 because that's what we sell in dollars, and that is enough of a threshold, though I may need to double check that because I don't even know what that 135 pounds is in dollars these days, because it has changed a little bit in 2025. But anyway, so it stinks. It has nothing to do with samples. We could set up a special package for samples, but it's not going to matter. It's all about that 135 pound equivalent threshold. So basically, if you want samples, you just need to buy a ton of them. Or if you're going to be buying a pen or buying something else, bottles of ink or something like that, that's the time to throw a bunch of samples on there, and then you could get them. So you can't get a few samples here and there, but you could get a lot of samples. If it's, $200 worth, then you can get samples all day long. But that's it. It's literally just burdensome bureaucracy, import tax stuff. And this has nothing to do with the tariff stuff for this year. Goes back to 2021. So sorry, it really stinks, but and that's not just us. This is literally any seller outside of the UK that is selling under 135 pound shipments has to deal with this kind of stuff. So that's about it. Maybe some people don't know that and are just not collecting it and not filing it, but there can be penalties for that. I don't know exactly how the UK would come after us for something like that, but they could ban you from being able to export anything or import. They could ban the seller if they find that they're not paying those taxes. They can ban the seller from being able to ship to the UK. That's the risk you take doing that kind of thing. So I would not be surprised at all if most smaller companies are really not aware or are not able to comply, and they're just shipping them anyway and just kind of rolling the dice there. So, but we're aware of it. We are very straight up about all tax things because that's just not a place where we mess around. So it does mean that sometimes it stinks. Anyway, that's my answer there. Fun stuff. Let's go to the next question. All right, question number 4. This is going to be my last question before we get into the spotlight for the VP. This comes from Corporal Captain Cosmic, I believe. CPLCAPT Cosmic. Says, "Hi, Brian. Thanks for the information as always. You're very welcome. I've recently gotten into fountain pens after learning more about them through your channel, getting recommended by YouTube." Well, thank you, YouTube. And I've since purchased a few pens from y'all. Well, thank you for supporting us. I decided to give them a try at work since I do a fair bit of writing. And while the experience is great, I do most of that writing on copy paper so that there are multiple copies of orders that we do. So copy paper initially in my mind is like paper that you would run through a copy machine, meaning just like inkjet paper or laser paper. Plain white sheets of paper. But I think you're talking about carbon copy paper. Okay, so you said the problem is that since writing with a ballpoint or rollerball pen requires some pressure, that carbon copy paper easily transfers through a few layers of paper so that it's all legible. But my fountain pens haven't been as successful in achieving this, and I don't want to put unnecessary pressure on my nibs that might damage them. My question is, are there certain types of nibs that would be better for writing with enough pressure to make the carbon copy paper work? Would a more flexible stainless steel nib handle pressure better or worse than a less flexible one like my TWSBI Eco? Maybe a broad nib instead of the extra fine ones I gravitate towards? Or am I better off finding a reliable rollerball that I like and using that when I'm filling out orders? Either way, I'm still going to enjoy my fountain pens in the areas where I can. Sorry for the long message and thanks in advance. Okay. I definitely have talked about this before, but it's been a while. And if you're new to pens, you're probably years from having discovered that from when I talked about it last. Carbon paper. So yeah, it's like if y'all are not familiar with it, which if you're my age or older, you definitely know what this stuff is. But you may not be that familiar because it's not really everywhere anymore. But a lot of times they're like handwritten receipts like you see in like diners and restaurants and stuff like that can sometimes have those, like short order cook. We use that kind of stuff a lot. You'll see this for like, meter maids and people writing tickets and things like that on the go. Anytime you need a duplicated copy of something, that'll be the case. It'll be something like that. And definitely like with, certain types of jobs that have like work orders or certain government jobs, things like that, carbon copy paper can still be relevant. So it's a very unique use case for fountain pens where the fountain pen actually works against you in this case, because part of the wonderful thing about fountain pens and why they write so well is that they don't require a lot of pressure. So they write smoothly, they don't take a lot of pressure, it doesn't make your hand cramp up and all these types of things. But in this case, you actually need that pressure to be able to write through multiple copies of your carbon copy paper. So basically, there's no getting around needing to put pressure because that's how this paper works. You mentioned, does a type of nib make a difference? Yes, you want a stiff nib. You do not want a flexible nib or a soft nib, because that's going to take away from some of the pressure. You could think like, oh, if it's a softer nib, it'll handle the pressure better. But it's also like it's acting like a shock absorber, sort of, which normally is good in a car or bike situation because you wouldn't feel the bumps as much. But in this case, you're trying to transfer that as much of that. So maybe the equivalent, this is going to be a really bad analogy. I just thought off the top of my head, but I do road cycling. It's my fitness thing. There's a reason why road racing bikes do not have shocks on them like mountain bikes do, because when you have shocks on your bike, it absorbs some of the energy that you're putting into the bike. So when you're pedaling, and you're in a racing bike situation, you want as much of your power to transfer from your legs down to the road, because that's going to propel you further. If you have shocks and stuff like that, that flexibility, that softness is going to dampen how much power is being put to the road. So I guess in this kind of weird metaphor that I'm going with here, this would be like you're wanting as much of your writing power, pressure to transfer through to the pages, because that's what's going to get you the darkest copy, especially if you're going like 3 or 4 pages deep on this carbon paper. You're going to want as much of that energy to transfer as possible. So soft, flexible nibs are not going to be good for you in this case. You're going to want the stiffest, hardest nibs that you can get. Most steel nibs are going to kind of fall into that category, unless you're going specifically for something that's known for writing soft as a steel nib. Like Yovo has their flex nib. Monteverde, Conklin, they have what's called their Omni Flex nib. You're not going to want that. You're not going to want a Noodler's Flex nib. You're not going to want a Diplomat Magnum nib, because that tends to be a little softer too. You're going to want something that's just what's known in the fountain pen world as a nail. You want something that is just does not have any flexibility to it whatsoever. I think the Eco is going to be fine for you, because Eco doesn't really have any flex to it. So you could definitely use your Eco. I would try that out and see. I don't think if you're pressing down so hard on it that you're actually forcing the tines to come apart, over time, that could end up doing what's called splaying those tines to the point where it won't come back as easily. So I would just make sure that you're holding your pen at a slightly more upright angle. So the lower the angle that you have, the more it's going to want to splay those tines. But the higher up you are, you're writing with the pen kind of more into the paper, as opposed to like dragging it across harder. Does that make sense? I don't know that it'll make a meaningful difference in terms of how it transfers onto the page, the higher angle you write with. Maybe that's something to play around with. But it will definitely help in terms of not splaying your tines as much if you hold it at a higher angle. But yeah, so I would play around with that. And then as far as the nib size goes, like extra fine versus broad, that is very interesting to me. I have not tested writing on carbon paper a lot myself. So this is something where you all might actually be able to help me out with this a bit. Those of you who have experience doing that. My inclination is that a broad nib is going to feel smoother and maybe write a little more pleasurable or hold up a little better, because that tipping is broader. If you're writing through the carbon paper and pressing really hard on it. But then also it's sort of spreading out how much you're pressing on a wider area. So it might not actually transfer as much of the writing through those pages. Their finer nib may actually do better for you. And then also if you have a broader nib too, if it's putting down more ink, then I don't know how that's going to handle on the paper. If it's going to absorb into it more and kind of look worse, I don't really know. So this is something where I might need some assistance from y'all in the comments. I think extra fine is going to be maybe difficult sometimes. I would be concerned about if you're writing really hard, you could actually like tear through the paper. But I don't know exactly what kind of paper you're dealing with. I think a fine nib would actually be a good all-around nib size, or a medium nib. Broad, I think it would be interesting to test. If you already have different nib sizes, I would literally just take whatever pens you have and try it out and see which one performs the best for you. I wouldn't worry too much about like longevity of the nib. if you do have to worry about that, this is where Lamy could be really good, because you can get replacement nibs from Lamy. That way, if you do end up kind of wearing out the steel nib from pressing on it really hard all the time, you can get a replacement nib. Pilot could also be good in this respect, because they have pens like the Kakano that are pretty inexpensive, and you can more or less replace those nibs as well. So that could be good. So you got a lot of options here. So yeah. And then honestly, bottom line is this may be a place where the benefits of a fountain pen just don't pay off as much. And it could just be more hassle for you to deal with that. And you might just go with a rollerball, like a G2 or something like that you like, or a ballpoint. And, in that exact type of instance, that's actually more the ideal tool. But if you love your fountain pen, you're writing with it in different places, and you happen to use the carbon paper a lot, and you don't want to be switching pens all the time, you can definitely make it work. But there you go. All right, pen spotlight. Let's take a look at the Pilot VP Link Midnight. All right, folks, let's take a look at the Pilot VP Link Midnight. It's got kind of a cool box. They used to do their boxes like much flatter, and now they're going vertical with it, which is kind of cool. So they are all numbered, and it's kind of cool. They do limited edition numbering for whatever that year is. So this year they made 2,025 of them globally. And I have number 198, apparently. I did not choose that specifically. It's just the luck of the draw. We can't honor specific number requests because we don't get to choose what numbers we get. So it's kind of, we just get what we get, and we don't get upset. As I used to say to my kids when they were younger. Kind of a cool box. I like the ombre effect. That's kind of neat. Let's see what we got going on here. Oh, I don't know if that's supposed to stay in there or not, but there you go. That's a little cardboard insert kind of thing. Okay, there we go. Yeah, stuff I would normally expect in the box. We got a warranty card. We got some information about how to use and fill and all that kind of stuff. Ta-da. And my guess is if you're buying this pen, you've probably filled a vanishing point before. Can't imagine this will be most people's starter vanishing point. Anyway, and then we've got ink cartridge and ink cartridge cap. So because this is a click retractable pen, if you're going to use cartridges, you don't have to have the cap, but it helps, to just protect the back of the cartridge. They're very sturdy cartridges though, honestly. But yeah, you can slide it onto the cartridge, and then as you're clicking away, it just gives you a little extra protection there. Okay, let's move this all out of the way and get into the box. So it's a bit weird because I'm showing you from an overhead angle. So I'll try to open it here as if it was looking more straight on. Ta-da! It's kind of cool. So it's an interesting little shape there, like a diamond, sort of. Yeah, like a diamond. Yeah. And then it's kind of cool. This thing just like props up like that. So yeah, I would say if this is going to be like something you wanted to display on your desk, it's not a bad little display. It's kind of cool. It doesn't like come apart or anything, which is probably why they put the stuff elsewhere inside the packaging. Yeah. And then, it's got your little Pilot capless. That's what it used to be called. But for the limited editions, they usually put capless on there. That part just slides right off. And then we've got our pen. So we got our blue and black packaging, which matches the Midnight blue and black thing that they've got going on here. I'll punch in a little bit so you can see more closely, because there's some details on the pen that can be a bit harder to miss if you are not looking at it closely. Okay, so normally when you have a vanishing point, it's just flat. So part of what you're getting with this one, and it may not be the easiest thing at first glance because it is a bit subtle, is you are getting this guilloche pattern. So this is metal, and that is engraved with, essentially what's, kind of like a rose engine type pattern or a guilloche pattern. So it's basically an engraving that is like a wave that's kind of going back and forth. It's this little engraver tool that's like going kind of back and forth like this as it goes down, and it gets this really interesting pattern on it. And I'm going to see if I can show you in any level of detail. There we go. So you can sort of see it's these engravings that kind of run the length of it, and looks pretty neat. And then they, it's metal, and then they coat it with this blue coating. This is really hard to see with the with the lighting here, but it does say Pilot Limited Edition on the center band. That's their thing that they do for the annual VPs. It says Japan. That's where it's made, and then it's got the number. So it says 0198 out of 2025. So whatever number that you would have on your pen, that's where it would show up right there. And that's how you know that you have a limited edition, is the center band. I guess half the center band. It's very tiny engraving, which is kind of nice because if you're not wanting to see it that much, you don't want it to be like really sticking out a lot, it's very, very subtle. And then, it's a vanishing point. So it's got your regular click. It's got a black nib on it, which is nice to match the black trim. All around, it's a very midnight looking pen, I would say. I think they named it pretty accurately. And then if you're not familiar with the vanishing points at all, it's a pretty simple design. I mean, well, it's very complex, but it's simple in the way that it works, where it has this nib unit inside. It is an 18 karat gold nib, right? Is it 18 or 14? I legitimately can't remember. 18 karat. Okay, that's right. 18 karat gold nib. And then it's got a converter that comes with it, their Pilot Con 40. But again, you can use the cartridge with the cartridge cap just as easily. When you fill it, you just take this unit out and then you fill it. And the filler hole's up here. So you got a little bit of distance in your ink. It doesn't do as well with the, I guess it's kind of like most other nibs. If you got a number 6 nib or whatever, you're not going to be able to get that close down in there. But yeah, that's where cartridges can be really good. I know a lot of people that aren't in love with this converter that will just refill cartridges. And the Pilot cartridges are really sturdy, so it's really good for that. And you get almost twice the ink capacity when you refill a cartridge as opposed to when you use the Con 40. So a lot of people using vanishing points just like to refill cartridges. And you do that with an ink syringe, like I have here. Ta-da! Okay. Not really too much else to say. It is a vanishing point. It is pricey. It is pricey, I will say. So their limited editions are always going to be more expensive than their regular ones. And when they have any type of engraving, that's a lot of extra labor. And part of that is going to raise the price. But it's still, it's a very expensive limited edition. I don't fully know why it is as expensive as it is. That's the price that they set for it. Now I do know that they do not allow any discounting on the limited editions. That is part of the higher price. Normally you would have like a 20% off, kind of cap that you can do for discounted pricing, but you cannot do that with this one. So you're going to see that one, basically that price everywhere. I have 2 other pens here. You're like, whoa, what are all these things? You just kind of slip those in the frame as you were talking. I did indeed. So these are 2 other previous Vanishing Point limited editions that also had the Goulet engraving. So I wanted to show those 2 just so you could see kind of what's in the Goulet collection, if you will. These 2 pens are no longer available anymore. And so if you don't have them, you can maybe find them, but they're going to be hard. So this one is easy to tell which edition it is, which year it is, because it has the number on the center band. So this is from 2016. This is what was known as Goulet. So they just called it Goulet. So pretty standard. They didn't do as much of the matte black trim back. This was 9 years ago. Gosh, 2016 does not feel like it should be 9 years ago, but it is. So this one, kind of an interesting pattern. It had, somewhat of that similar kind of wavy Goulet pattern, but then it had just straight lines in it. So it kind of alternated straight lines and wavy. So it had kind of an interesting pattern to it, whereas this one is more just the straight up barley pattern. I think it's called barley. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not like a Goulet expert myself. I know how it's done, but I don't know all the patterns. Because it's definitely like more of a European thing than an American thing. And then this one was called Link Black. This is from 2020. So this was 5 years ago. And seems like a pretty similar engraving to the Link Midnight, which would make sense because they're both called Link. So I don't know, it kind of looks like a chain link fence almost, which is not typically associated with limited edition. It's like one of the more economical fencing options that you have, but it has sort of that similar effect to it. So yeah, there you go. Engravings are very similar. The Link Black is definitely shinier than the Link Midnight, which I kind of dig the less shiny version of the Link Midnight. But there you go. So that's it. I believe it's medium nib only. I think that's how they do these. It's how they've historically always done them. I believe that's all we have is the mediums. And again, it's only $2,025 globally. They are more expensive. They're $580. So it is not for the faint of heart. But yeah, that's it. That's all they made. That's all they're ever going to make. And if you're interested, we do have them now at Goulet Pens, and you can check it out. We might have them for a little while because that's a bit much for some people to bite off, but still a cool pen. So I like it. I think it is just a bit expensive, but that's okay because that's what Pilot did. So that's really all I have for you. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention. So they do have medium nib on this one, but because the nib unit, you can just swap it out. It's really easy to get a different type of nib on it if you wanted to get a different nib size. You know, you can't exchange the nib, but if you have other vanishing points, you can move stuff around. You can get a stub nib. You can get a whatever. You can get different things on it if you prefer. So yeah, nice little additional option there. And that's it. That's it for the VP. All right. Now that we're out of the pen portion of it, we can get into my adventures. I've been very busy, but a lot of it's like boring family stuff that's not super exciting. But we did have an interesting event happen. We had a friend's wedding that we went to. Not only did we go to said wedding, well, this is one that I mentioned that I made the giant charcuterie board for. So I got to see it in action, and it looks pretty cool. I got to say, it turned out pretty decent. So they absolutely loved it. It added to the overall ambiance of the wedding. It was like an outdoor wedding that was in like a farm type setting. So it really fit in well, and it looked great. So I definitely ate a lot of charcuterie off that board. So I personally enjoyed it. But yes, also Rachel was playing piano at this thing. So she does play piano. It was her first time ever playing at a wedding, actually. It was her first time ever playing outdoors. And it was also her first time playing at night. Well, I guess maybe she's played at night indoors, but it was very interesting. So at one point in the reception, I actually had to hold my phone and use the phone light so she could see the music. And it was so humid out. It wasn't super hot, but it was so humid out that her pages were like kind of curling and sticking together. So I also had to like be her page turner. And I accidentally turned 2 pages at once at one point. And that was not good on my part. But she rolled with it. She did a great job. She's an amazing musician. But yeah, it was kind of funny. So it's kind of fun. It wasn't funny, but it was fun. It was eventful, and it was cool because I didn't have to perform at all. I just got to be a roadie. And I guess the one performance I did was turning the page, and I blew that. So, go figure. It's okay. No one noticed. Yeah, so that was fun. And then, I've been taking Joseph behind the wheel. He has his learner's permit now. He is such a cautious kid. Oh my gosh. We went up and down like our driveway and like the road that we're on. And I think we went the equivalent of about a mile, and it took half an hour because he's so cautious. So we're going to build up to driving on a road with other cars. He's just so cautious. I'm not going to be worried about him getting in an accident. Maybe he'll get like nervous and make a mistake. But I'm working on that. So we'll see. But anyway, this is part of the fun. It's a stage of life that we're in now. And then, it's like getting into the leaf season now. Leaves are starting to fall. My daughter loves that because we have a lot of leaves that fall in our driveway, and she loves blowing them off. This is like her harvest season. So she goes out and blows the leaves like every day. And, we pay her. So she's very motivated to blow it off a lot. But that's okay because I always have a clean driveway. So I don't mind. Get to help my kids out. They work for me. Everybody wins. And that's kind of it. We've done a bunch. I think I mentioned like our HOA sort of situation, neighborhood thing. So we're in the middle of that, processing paperwork and doing all that kind of stuff. It's fun. We had our meeting with our neighborhood and it went well. Everybody's as motivated to do as little bureaucracy as possible, including us. So yay, because we don't have enough to do, right? Like we also need to like file an LLC and do all this other stuff. It's like, but we do have experience doing that. So anyway, just trying to be good neighbors, help each other out. But it's kind of nice. So yeah, that's kind of about it. Yeah, that's all I got. Weather is great, enjoying it. Bugs are dying. It's a beautiful thing. My kids are loving the cooler weather with the bugs not being around. And that's kind of it for this week. So want to go ahead and wrap up. I do have a fun fact for you, but I just want to thank you for watching. Leave me some feedback in the comments. Ask me some more questions. Again, I'll be off next week, but I will bank those questions and save them up for next time. Check out gouletpens.com. Again, we don't run ads, but we are kind of one giant ad ourselves. But I try to we're not just pushing stuff, right? Like I'm trying to actually give you good knowledge and education and entertainment, I guess. Yeah, so check out fountain pen, ink, paper needs, all that stuff. Subscribe to our channels, and there we go. So, as my creatively bankrupt brain is trying to think of fun facts every single week, I've just been like, what is the origin of these random things? Because I do kind of like knowing where stuff came from and how it started out. So perhaps one of the lesser exciting fun facts I've ever done was about the history and the origin of carbon copy paper. So if you notice at the beginning of the Q&A, I did not say, I've got a really exciting fun fact for you, because I started out being like, I was genuinely interested. And then I was like, I'm doing the origin of carbon copy paper. This has to be one of the most boring things that I've ever done. Anyway, so here's the history. So carbon paper, also known as carbonic paper, that's interesting, is the paper that's mentioned in the last question just a few moments ago, that contains multiple sheets of paper where you write on the top one and it creates copies on all the other ones. So if you didn't know this already, this is originally where the term CC comes from in email. So if you are CCing somebody, you are doing what's called a carbon copying somebody. That's where it comes from, is from this type of paper. So isn't that interesting? Maybe you didn't know that. This paper was invented in 1801. That's a while ago, by an Italian inventor named Pellegrino Turri, who was making it for his mechanical typing machine, which was an early version of the typewriter. It has very niche uses today, and as of 2013, there's only one company in Canada, there's 2 companies in the US, and only 1 in the UK that still makes this type of paper. So not a huge market, but there you go. Kind of interesting. I could have gotten all into like the scientific stuff of how this paper actually works, but I was not even excited enough to read through it all. So I was like, that's not a good sign for me sharing it as a fun fact. Anyway, that's all I got for y'all this week. I'll see you in a little bit. Thanks for watching, and right on.